everyone has heard of Adam and Eve, the first human couple created according to the Christian Bible. However, in World of Darkness, and specifically Vampire the Masquerade, there is a different telling of who the first woman was. There is a Noddist myth that suggests Lilith was the first woman created, not Eve. And it was, in fact, Lilith that got Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And she rescued Cain from the wilderness of endless despair and taught him magic. So let's get into the story of Lilith. The story goes that when God created Adam, he created him from the dirt. He molded him from the clay and breathed life into him. And the Noddist scholars believe that there is a portion of this history, a portion of this story, which has been left out from the tales of history. They claim that when God made Adam and molded him from the clay and the dirt of the earth, he also made woman from the same materials. And the first woman that was created was Lilith. And the Noddist scholars continue by saying Adam and Lilith did not have a decent relationship together. They claim that Adam tried to assert himself or assert dominance over Lilith, and she refused to accept his dominion over her, considering themselves as equal because they were created from the same material. Among the many altercations that the two of them had, eventually Lilith chose to flee the Garden of Eden. And it's from here that she becomes vilified. She becomes a representation of defiance. She becomes, for some, a symbol of resistance, a symbol of independence. It can be up to you to decide whether this is truth for your World of Darkness games or not, but it is very clear that many texts and many interpretations of Lilith define her as a demon, someone who has been negatively represented, and this is potentially a reason why, at least according to World of Darkness. And before you send any hate my way in the comments section, just know that we're having a little fun with history and telling some stories. And speaking of that, this story does continue. After Lilith left the Garden of Eden, Adam went and spoke to God and said, "She's gone, she left me." To which his response was to send 3 angels to go collect Lilith and bring her back to the Garden of Eden. When the angels found her, she was in a cave, which I presume to be in the land of Nod, for reasons we'll get to in a minute, and she was also giving birth. Some accounts claim that this child was Enoia, the antediluvian of the Gangrels. Other accounts suggest that this was Lamia, which was a bloodline of the Cappadocian clan. However, Lilith refused to go back to the garden, and the angels said, "We're not having any of that." And they laid down a very strict and severe punishment, which set the mood or set the tone for Lilith for a long time to come. It's also said with this story that Lilith attempted to return to the garden on her own. And what she found was that she had been replaced. Adam had found another mate, or rather a new one had been created for him. It is also said that when she found this out, she stole Adam's seed. And with this seed, she uses it to create or produce earthbound demons. Now the Bahari, they have some interpretations, they have some thoughts on the history of Lilith as she continued through time. They claim that Lilith enjoyed several affairs with angelic beings, and one of them, whose name should sound familiar, Lucifer. The Bahari claim that there were multiple gods who had created their own gardens, and the Garden of Eden was just one of them. And the relationship that Lilith had with Lucifer, she stayed in his garden. As a result, and the relationship that they formed over their time together, Lucifer gave Lilith a gift, the Cloak of Night. Using this cloak, Lilith began exploring the lands, exploring the areas outside of all of the gardens. What she found was that the world outside of the gardens was scorched and dead. And while she was exploring, she went back to the Garden of Eden and used her cloak to gain entry to the garden. And it is said that Lilith transformed into a snake and convinced Eve, who was pretty naive of anything of the world, convinced her to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge, which eventually got Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden. Now, the Bahari, they are a group that worships Lilith as the Dark Mother. They do have some vampires in their ranks, but the ones that are vampires, they don't like to call themselves kindred. They don't view themselves as part of kindred society. But vampires are not the only members of these cults. Some are just regular mortals. Some are awakened mages, particularly those of Verbena. But we're still not done with the story of Lilith. If it's true that Lilith was the one who convinced Eve to partake of the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge, when it comes to light what she's done, she is rejected by Lucifer. She is rejected by her other lovers because they were angelic beings. She was banished, and it doesn't really say how long this was for, though it had to be long enough that she would run into Cain, because that's what happened. And as we all know, the first person to commit murder. Lilith would have been building her own garden, at least that's what I presume, because when you hear the story from Cain's perspective, when he encounters Lilith, it's said that he was taken to a garden. But if she was rejected from all of the other gardens that existed, even if you believe in the history or the telling of the story, there was only one garden, the Garden of Eden, she would have needed to create a sanctuary to live in, being that the land of Nod was a very inhospitable place. Lilith, when she met Cain, she knew there was something different about him. She could see that there was a mark on him. She could see the aura of something on him that no one had ever done before, and that was, of course, murder. So she wanted to take him in. She wanted to learn from him and see what made him different. But he, of course, also wanted to learn something from her. And eventually she did agree to teach him. And what she taught him was to become known as the vampire disciplines. He was a master in all of them. But how does Cain repay Lilith for the knowledge that he's gained and the time that he spent with her? He abandoned her too. And then he went off to form his own city called Enoch with blackjack and hookers. Lilith, in her despair of being abandoned again, she is said to have created a third garden, known as the Garden of Sorrows. This place of pain, this place of abandonment, this place of sorrow, she is said to be preparing for Gehenna. One thing that we don't know is what happened to the Garden of Eden. What happened to all of those gardens that it used to exist? One theory put forth by some Verbena is that Lilith carved out some pockets in the Umbra and moved her garden there so that she could watch her children, she could watch society grow and change. Now, Verbena is a name for mages in World of Darkness who really take the old ways to heart. They try to keep the craft, the wisdom, the practices and teachings of old gods, powerful mages, shamans, witches, warlocks, you name it. If it was old and powerful, they probably have had a hand in keeping those traditions alive. These Verbena also believe that Lilith is the most powerful oracle in the world. She is the predecessor to magic. And they aren't sure if she's a benevolent force. They don't know if maybe she wants good for the world. For now, I will leave that up to you and your tables. If you'd like to learn more about Cain or the Gehenna Wars, please click on the videos on your screen now. Thank you to all of my patrons who continue to support me and the channel. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.